Hey Sarah, how are you today?
I am doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you, Abby?
I'm doing really well. Actually, we were kind of just talking as well off camera briefly, and my energy has a little bit of a dip at this time of day because we wanted to coordinate time zones, but we know that I've got you at a super chirpy time, so I'm super happy about that.
2 p.m. here in Canada. Can't go
Yeah,
wrong.
perfect. So we are going to talk a lot about your story today, or part of your story that you shared with me when I sort of advertised these chats. And um for the benefit of the people listening, we're going to be talking in the main part about navigating loss, particularly about your parents, who both you lost when I would say you were still, well, childhood and then still young in your 20s. So do you want to just start off by, because your this story starts so early, like, do you have any sort of earliest memories before any of that happened? I was wondering.
It's interesting because when you suffer through a loss at the age of 4, which was how old my father passed away, I have memories of him before he passed, but you start questioning what those memories are because they're very specific moments. And I don't know if they're things that I actually remember or stories that were told to me that now my brain has sort of kind of remembered. But I like to live in that space because the memories that I have were of like a caring person who was spending time with me and sharing who he was as a person. So we were connecting. Very, very specific, those scenarios. And because, like I said, it was 4, there's not too much more other than that in terms of memories.
Yeah, so you do have some memories of, like you say, there's a caring person, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and you
Yes.
interacting and things like that.
Exactly. One of the stories that I remember, one of the scenarios that I remember was him showing me how to blow a bubble with gum. So trying
Mm,
to learn, when you're a kid and you put that piece of bubble gum in your mouth and you're sticking your tongue through and you're not quite sure what to do. And yes, I just have
yeah.
that memory of him blowing a bubble and me trying and eventually succeeding and him being really ecstatic and happy for me for that. So it's a really great memory.
Yeah, for sure, because that's a tough one.
Right?
I need some patience to guide
Right.
someone through.
Exactly. I have kids. I know. I get it now.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
So, like, as much as I um would love to hear your stories on this, and I'm so intrigued to hear how you can navigate something like this, and ongoing, because myself, I feel myself very privileged to have only experienced loss at a much later age, and I would say in the order it should happen in terms of grandparents, etc. So I'm coming at this with a lot of naivety myself, which I hope you will excuse. I want to be able to hold this space to hear what you've got to share as well. But do you
What I'm
want to
hearing
just,
is you're coming from a place of curiosity, and I just want to say I appreciate all of it.
yeah, curiosity for sure, and learning, and trying to obviously facilitate what was going to get some real connective stories for the people that are going to be listening to this, because there will be people that have and have not experienced losses, and people resonate with different parts of stories in different ways. So I would love to hear your take on this story, and like we said, we're just going to flow with where the
For sure.
conversation goes on this one.
For sure. Well,
um
let's go
but
straight. Do you want me to start straight, like after that memory, the bubblegum memory, and just tell you sort of what my experience was like as I remember it processing through that first period of
let's
loss?
let's go for it. And then, any questions that come up, we can chat through those and see where this flows.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I was 4 and I remember that I had visited like a kindergarten. So here in Canada, we started where I was living in Canada. You start when you turn 5. And so I remember we moved somewhere and I was starting, to have memories form of going to kindergartens and viewing. And then the next memory I do remember a phone call happening and my mom responding to it and behaving in a very scared, something's wrong, something's happening manner. And she had to phone my aunt and ask my aunt to come over. And what ensued was a period actually of 6 months. So my father actually was in a motorcycle accident, and his motorcycle hit a pothole and he hit his head on a pole. So he was actually in a coma for 6 months. And my mom was visiting the hospital, etc. And I wasn't allowed to go to the hospital. So for context, I was born in 78. This was around 1982 here in Canada. People's, perspectives on how children process through loss was they are not to be traumatized and not to sort of be put in front of these things, but kind of protected behind the scenes. So it's interesting knowing what I know now and accessing those memories, because I think I wasn't given the space to understand, to talk. I didn't have a family really that was able to kind of process through these things with me. So I just remember sort of feeling very isolated. Like I remember drawing him a picture to give to my mom to take to the hospital, and then being in the car when she got out of being in the car while she got out at the hospital, and me kind of looking up like he's in there and I can't go see him. Like I remember feeling that way. Also, I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. So another thing, I guess, that's kind of important to this is my mom had me when she was 19 years old,
right,
and she was 23 years old when 23, 24, when this was happening. So she was a very young mother with 2 children. I had a brother also who was 2, so 4 and 2. And so I want to give her some grace. Like she was processing through a lot. My family didn't really understand, like the scenario was very, very complex. And so I don't have any sort of ill will about this scenario, but it when I access these memories, it helps me understand why I became the person that I became, just kind of growing up in these kind of situations. And so I remember going to kindergarten eventually, and, Father's Day coming around for that first time. And I remember everybody planting beans to take home to their father, and me kind of looking at this little planter and going, who's mine for, and the teacher saying, well, it could be for your mom. And I was like, okay. I was 5 years old. Right. So kind of for the next few years, it kind of just became like this weird story and this weird sense of sadness, but it was competing with me growing into becoming a human. At 4 years old, you're still very small in terms of who you are as a human and where your brain's at and what you're able to acknowledge and access. So I was kind of going through that, both those feelings all at the same time. And so, like I said, it became a story. I remember when I was a teenager, we tried talking to my father through a Ouija board, and it was a beautiful thing. I was with my friends, and I felt a moment of vulnerability where I was crying, and it was nice to feel that supportive friendship while we were kind of connecting with the spirit of somebody that was supposed to mean something really deep and large to me, but wasn't there. So it was, that's kind of what childhood was like. It was like always these, stories from other people of what should have been, and me comparing myself to them, and then kind of going, okay, well, let's go have fun.
yeah. And when you said about and I can definitely relate to this part of being brought up in a like a loving household, but being protected, thinking that protecting you from sadness or negative emotion is perhaps the best way. Did that seem to continue throughout your childhood as you were growing up? Was it not spoken about, or how has that navigated, like the your father's
So
memory?
unfortunately for my situation, my mother was she was, for, like I said, she had me when she was 19, so she was a young mom. She was legally blind, and she was also, it turns out, severely and very mentally ill.
Right.
So unfortunately for me, while I was speaking specifically about my experience of loss with my father, the loving support that I think they gave me at that time was very much, it was provided by my grandparents and us coming together as a family to process through that. But unfortunately for my experience as a child, we detached from my grandparents because of my mother's mental illness. And so a lot of the ensuing years that I have were not, like, there was not a lot spoken about him. My mother moved on to different men. She had her own troubles and things she was dealing with. So that loss was my first sense of trauma. But between this and my next major loss, there were a lot of other traumatic events, which is what makes me the trauma-informed, deep transformational coach that I am. Is there's a lot of stories I could talk about a lot of different things. But unfortunately, to answer your question, there was not. I was not in a supporting, loving environment for the next quite a few years, actually. I had to
Right.
kind of navigate through a lot of different things. But yeah, with respect to the loss of my father, there was that consistent sort of me owning the memories. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so do you have, in that time of growing up, then can you still find happy memories in that time? Is it more just a mix of memories with not so much emotion attached? Like how does that feel for you growing up?
You know what, to be honest with you, it's a mixed bag. Like, if I were to look at it like a pie and cut it, it would probably be 50-50 if I really were able to kind of measure the two against each other. I think what has served me well, and one of my superpowers that I assumed I grew up with, because I don't know where I connect I connected with my grandfather this way. But one thing my grandfather and I were always able to do is, like, I bring the fun to places. I'm an
Mm,
energetic person, and I've
I
always
can tell.
been that way. And I something intuitive inside of me has always protected myself against influences of others that can get rid of my shine. Now, I haven't been 100% successful, and I've had a lot of learning to do and growing and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's I think it's about a 50-50, but I can access those memories and they kind of come up with the same energy to me, because I don't see those negative experiences anymore as triggering. I've
Mm,
processed through them all. I've worked through them all, and they've all become life lessons to me. There's nothing I haven't been able to turn into something that served me better down the road. And while it hurt at the time, and it really sucks to have gone through it, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am today without it. So I'm very good at kind of focusing on that.
mm,
Yeah. Very good
yeah.
at focusing on that. And that helped too. The next big loss was of my mother. When I was 27, she committed suicide. So she, like, the mental illness that I'm speaking of, when I say I grew up with it, like, it was that real. It's what took her. So, in my 20s, processing through that kind of understanding and learning on how to be a daughter to someone like that, didn't even know, but I was preparing. Like, I've always sought out ways to survive. And fortunately, I found those ways through people that were just outside of my immediate family circumstance. And they served me well. They did, and they continue to
Mhm.
do so.
Yeah, because I was just gonna ask you, like, do you at that point see a lot of other um different types of family arrangements around you and think, hang on a second, like there's this one type that other people seem to have, and that's not what I have, and that's confusing or?
It's interesting because to me it wasn't confusing, because I think deep within me I've always come from a place of curiosity.
Mm,
Always, always. And so I think because I wasn't like my mom, while, there was traumatic events around being with multiple men throughout my early childhood, being in those situations provided me access to actually a lot of different families and a lot of different configurations. And so instead of kind of, I also say I'm fortunate because I don't have a lot of limiting beliefs that come from the structure that sometimes families create,
mm,
where you're exposed to only a certain type of person, scenario, lifestyle. I was kind of given a lot more freedom through the access that I got through my mom to, again, like I said, kind of see that everybody was different. So I actually didn't know how bad some of the things I had been through as a teenager, especially because they're the freshest. I didn't realize how bad they were until much, much later in life. Actually,
mm,
after I had had my own children, was I really able to look back and go, oh. So from the family perspective of growing up without a dad, like I saw so many configurations of family that I didn't think I was special. I just thought I was, I was somebody with a different type of upbringing, and everybody has one. That's kind of the attitude that I somehow used to survive, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I want to talk more about the sort of point where you realize that this is something I need to work on or process and things like that, like in later life, like you say, maybe after children. But just to pop back to, um I'd love to just understand a little bit more around your mum's death. Like was there, you said that she'd struggled with mental health for a long time, so was it something that you had experienced, the threat of death before, or were you aware of suicidal thoughts, or was there a sort of a lead up to that, if you like, or how did that all play
Yeah.
out for you at that point?
Great question. And I actually have a pivotal moment. So the pivotal moment with my mom was, so I left home when I was 17, but I didn't just leave home. Like, I moved to a different province. I ran
Okay.
away. I ran away. And that caused some difficulty for my relationship with my mother. It caused some relationship for some difficulty with the relationship with my siblings. But I needed to escape. I just saw an opportunity, and I got to go with it. So I was living on my own in Toronto, which is a different province. I was living on my own in
Yeah.
a different province. And my mom tried to rebuild that relationship with me, and we were struggling to build a relationship from afar, but also me kind of being on my own and kind of understanding now, like, what, I don't really need this, right? So I was struggling with that. And then, so there was constant fights and friction and trauma and drama and all that fun stuff. And then one day she went missing. She just took off. She moved back to the other province, but didn't give me a way to be in touch with her. So I sat with that for, I would say, probably in retrospect, a few months. And
Mm,
then I went to a family doctor somehow and asked for help and said, I need to talk to someone, because I think something's wrong with my mom. She's gone missing, and I'm scared, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know who to talk to. And my family doctor gave me a prescription and told me to go see a psychologist. So that is really when, and I remember so clearly the first time I sat down in that psychologist chair. First of all, I was like, what's the difference between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a mental health
sure.
practitioner? Because I was super curious.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I started things off. And then he explained, and I was like, okay, I'm in the right spot, because I love talking. I think talking about our feelings and things we're processing through is like, it's my jam. It works for
Yes.
me.
Exactly.
And then the second thing I asked him was like, I'm pretty sure my mom's crazy, and I'm just using the word crazy because that was my experience. I respect all language, and I know that there's some difficulty with people when they hear it called that way, but when I'm explaining my story, it's just an easy way to access what I was, and it's literally what I said word by word. And I said, and I'm worried that something's wrong with me. I'm really concerned because I've heard that these things are hereditary. And so I had to process through at 19, I had just gotten this really great job, but I'd lost and I was processing through all this, but I really wanted to make sure I was okay. And I wanted a professional to help me figure out if I was okay. And he did, and it worked. And it took, like, I feel like it took maybe 6 or 7 months till I got to that place where I was like, I don't know what to talk about anymore. And he's like, I think that means we're good for now. And so, but in that 7 months, what I processed through was learning about he basically educated me on what mental health is, what mental illness is, what my mother had based on what I was describing only. He wasn't obviously diagnosing her, but we were focusing more on my experience because I was the one looking for healing. So we processed through all that, got to the other side. And then my mom came back into my life by accident. Like we saw her on TV, and it was just this big drama. And when she came back into my life, so there was a period of 3 years before she committed suicide. So I had this kind of 3-year, and it was still what it was before, except I was stronger. My mom was still constantly trying to provoke me, trying to get me going, trying to tell me how to control my life, how I should do my life, et cetera, et cetera. But I was like understanding now that she had that mental illness, and I was able to put boundaries in place to protect myself.
Right. Got you. So, like you say, you could then the difference was then you're viewing it from a more informed place for yourself. You know more what you're dealing with, but similar experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was also able to anticipate and see the like when the things were happening before. I just thought, this is what my mother's like. It's normal. Like, I know something's wrong, but I don't really know, like nobody's ever told me anything. I'm just kind of guessing. So to come from that other side, to be on that other side where I could see what she was doing, and I could, it was no longer personal. She wasn't personally attacking me. It was, she I believe she had bipolar disorder or some sort of schizophrenia. Like, there was ups and downs. So I was able to kind of see, okay, right now she's in a down. This is sort of the way that people like, so it just gave me that perspective, and that able to better prepare myself for those things when they happened, and then be ready to deal with them. And honestly, that's also what helped me process through when she actually did commit suicide. She did have a couple of false attempts shortly before. So I'd say, maybe that last year, I think she had 2 situations where she ended up in a mental health facility and, getting a very subpar treatment. I have some issues with Canada and our services for people who need mental health programs that don't have a lot of money.
Right.
So she was getting sort of access to that sort of help. And it was difficult, and obviously still very traumatic to lose her. But I think I was better prepared for that situation as well, because of the work that I had done. For the reason that I feel inside was, again, I've just always wanted to survive and be as happy as I can. Yeah.
And at this point then, because you said sort of you came back a little closer, say even physically, or closer together in sort of the 3 years before she died. So it was that what did that look like? Are you seeing her often, or is it more just, are you hearing about her experience being in a hospital through other family members, or what does the relationship look like in those sort of final years?
Yeah, unfortunately, due to distance mostly, and fortunately due to distance in the same token, I was pretty much far away and experiencing these things for the most part from afar. Now, one time when it got really serious, I remember it was about a 5-hour drive. So I remember driving into where she lived to go see if I could support, getting her out and setting her up. I went and I bought her, she was living in an apartment that had no furniture, no nothing. I don't know really how she was surviving. So my partner at the time and I we bought furniture for her and I was trying to help her find a reason to live. Like I was doing my best to try to bring her some comfort by giving her comforts in her own home, because it just didn't seem like a place where she could go and feel safe and have healing moments. It was kind of like she was just squatting there and living there, in the interim. And in the end, I think she was in that mindset where that's where she was. And so I wanted her to be in a different place, but that just wasn't the eventuality that was going to come to play. She was going to succeed in her attempts to end her time on this earth.
Right.
Yeah.
And how does that impact you, like, immediately afterward, like in the time after that? Because I could imagine there's a whole range of different emotions, from the type of relationship that you had and the experiences with her, and then the distance, and then the sort of final passing. Like, what does that next few days, weeks, months look like for you?
I mean, I think the best way to describe it is it's sad and lonely and dark. Like it's a very dark and sad and lonely place. The way that I process through through loss specifically is I cry no matter what. Anybody dies, somebody at work died, I'm bawling my eyes out, and then I'm Gucci, I'm good. But with my mom, it was more because she was my mom. And so it was dark, it was deep, it was sad, it was like you feel like this whole shift in the world. Like one day your life is what you remember as normal, and then you're on the other side of this event, this traumatic event, and it's like this whole new chapter of the world, and you see things differently. And for a long time, like I said, you see things dark and you see things sad, and you wake up in the morning and you do things to try to avoid the feelings, but they come back because that's how our brains work. And I wasn't immune to that. I think doing the work helped prepare me for, feelings of guilt and feelings that came up, but they still came up and I still had to process through them. I think because I had done the work, I was able to process through them quicker, but sadness loomed for a really long time. Just sadness for the loss of what could have been. She was 47 years old. She had me young, we were 20 years practically apart, and there's just, so much more life. I'm 45 almost. And I'm thinking in my brain nowadays, like, whoa, like how much did this, like, I have so much life ahead of me. and to be so sad to not want to continue, it's really tough. It's really tough. And those first few weeks were tough. Now, for me, it was weeks, but I had another thing coming, which was I was pregnant. I was 10 weeks pregnant with my first daughter when this happened. And so here I am, just coming out of morning sickness, worried I'm going to vomit at my mom's funeral and everything. And because there's this life inside of me, and meeting people I hadn't seen in years and saying, this is so sad, I can't believe this. And then, oh, I hear you're pregnant. So it was like this weird kind of shift all the time, where it was like I was anchored to this life growing inside of me as sort of something to propel me out of that darkness quicker, I think, than potentially other people would, because it was like a life. And I always wanted to be a mom, and I was so excited, and it was planned, and it was, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, but like you say, also these just two completely different worlds almost coexisting, and yeah, that must on a daily basis have been well, tell me what it was like. Like, what did your
it was
days
a
look
roller
like?
coaster. It was a roller
Yeah.
was the roller coaster you're probably imagining when I describe it is up and down. It was a roller coaster. It was like 1 minute, I'm thinking about delivering a baby. So one thing that's interesting about my mom and I's relationship is she had a baby when I was 14. I have a half brother out there. And I was in the delivery room with her. So at 14 years old, I got to experience the miracle of like watching my mother deliver my brother live in person. And so here I was pregnant, and like obviously I'm going back to those memories, and I couldn't talk to her about it. So there was like moments of sadness like that, and moments of knowing that, she was going to have a grandchild and she wasn't going to get to know this grandchild. So those would go through my head. And then, I would have moments of, just like it was able to push it aside because other people were asking me about the baby. So I think what did me well was working. I was working, and I've always been a very friendly person. So I've always had a lot of friends. I've always had a lot of support around me. So being able to access those friendships and live in the space of as often, and friends are great, right? They'll let you live in whatever space you want. You want to be sad, you can be sad. You want to be happy, you can be happy. But not doing, like, I didn't have to do it alone. And I had something that we could focus on, because when you lose someone, there's oftentimes this awkwardness. People don't know what to say. Not everybody's great at giving each other space, and so they say the wrong thing. But I had an easy out for everyone. Like if somebody was getting awkward, I could just start talking. Oh yeah, so the baby was moving, and it was like, okay, we could talk about something else, right? So it gave me a lot of opportunity to help myself, help others. And like I said, and the support of my friends and us all having something else to focus on, like a baby shower and just different things. It made, from my perspective, the journey easier, but that's my perspective. People could have looked inside and thought the other things. That's how I felt about it, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can relate to, I suppose, having children in the room or pets in the room when there have been difficult conversations, and it's almost like that there is that distraction. We can just switch off at any moment if we need to, and park those difficult parts there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So was there a time where you felt like, okay, I need, or maybe this was continued, you said you worked with the psychologist previously, was there a time where you thought, okay, I now need to seek the help of some other specialist or therapist, or I need to start back on my own self journey? Any point like that you can remember specifically?
Many. 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 I remember specifically around my mom passing, I did go to a grief counselor. I think though the inner work that I did when I was in my 20s was very transformative. And I kind of learned those like underground, granular sort of needs that I needed to help process through things. So I mentioned earlier friendship. I need to talk things through. Even today, if something traumatic happens, because it still does, I have my peeps, right? Like my peeps that I go to, and we joke, but we're not joking, that it's like nice and cheap therapy.
Yeah, no, yeah, really is.
Because I've done the inner work, I talk myself through it, and my friends are just there to listen and pat me on the back and to remind me how awesome I am, because it's hard to feel that way when you're feeling sadness and loss and or if you're going through traumatic events, like just the uncertainty and pain. Like when you're in all of those negative places, it's hard to remember what's good. And that's the friendships that I have set up meet and these are my needs. Everybody has different needs, but mine are, I need people who can remind me what's good, who can remind me of all the great things I've already done, all the great things I have for the future, because I'm not focusing on those when I'm in pain, uncertainty, fear, loss, stress. I'm just focusing on all the things that are going wrong. And the way that I need to get out of that is I need to talk to people. Reality TV watching didn't delay, and I can zone out, I can not think about it, but it doesn't help me get it out. It doesn't help me process
Yeah.
through. So processing through for me is talk. I did do a couple of other stints for some other reasons. In my 20s, I went to psychologists. I processed through all that for different reasons. So I think I just started to kind of see patterns around what the advice they were giving and started implementing them in my life. And yeah, so I never stopped talking. I just found different outlets for that need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And did you like, how did you collect this group of friends? Because this seems to have been really essential to your growth. I can appreciate that, I need to have these chats. It's kind of the reason we're having this chat now, because connecting on with different people, different stories, being able to just listen and hold support for one another, etc., etc. But it's not always just easy to find that. And I imagine, if being from such a unique upbringing, if you like, then maybe there weren't too many people that could relate to what you'd been through. So like, how did you collect? Was it like collecting certain people along the way on your journey? Like, how did that look?
It absolutely was. If I were to talk about my core, those peeps that I talk about that I could download to, there's an interesting thing that bonds them all, and that's most of them have been neighbors. I don't know what it is with me and neighbors. I'm very fortunate, but one of my oldest friends was a neighbor when I was 5 years old, and we got lucky because her mom and my mom bonded in their fun times, and we stayed friends. So that was like neighbor number one. And then when I moved into another house, like another bestie next door, now I have a very friendly face. I'm a very curious person. I talk to a lot of people, and there are a lot of false start friendships, I'll call them, where I trusted the wrong person, so I've had experience with lots and lots of friends, and I think a lot of people would say that they're my friend, and I do have lots and lots and lots of friends that satisfy different needs and I've made with different connections. But those true like core people that I download to have been, like I said, mostly neighbors. I'm thinking in my head, mostly neighbors, one coworker, and my partner who I met online dating. So it's kind of randomish, except for a lot of them were neighbors, and it's about sort of filtering through connections. I learned early on that the easy way for me to understand if I'm going to connect with somebody is if they're curious about me, because I could be curious about everyone, and people love that. People love to talk about themselves. Who doesn't, right? But there's certain people that are curious about you out of the gate as well, and you connect with them, and they, you're not just hearing their stories, but they're actually asking about yours. Those relationships are the ones that tend to grow into more with me. Those are the space, the friendships and the people that I tend to kind of explore further with. The rest, I'll be nice. We'll hang out and we'll talk and we'll catch up and see how we're doing. But there's all kinds of people out there, and I'm not going to connect with everyone.
Yeah, of course. Well, no, that it makes me feel like that's that connection that you seem to have with those people. Like, it's I can feel that, people feel envious of that. Like, where do I find those people? But like you say, it's collecting these experiences, almost a little bit of a sifting process of, actually, let me think about how this relationship is serving me, or is it just draining me? And then we build from there.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So how would you say that all the sort of these experiences that we've talked about impact you, or do they impact you sort of now, years on? Because I know you've gone on to be a transformational coach, and you can like tell us more about that and what that means, and what you bring to that from your experiences. But yeah, what does that, do you still find things coming up that are related to those early years that you had?
All the time, all the
Yeah.
time. Sometimes in the most like surprising ways, like
Okay.
one day a few months ago, I was opening the linen closet and it smelled like my grandmother, and I just started bawling my eyes out, and I was like, oh my gosh, where's this coming from? Let me just get through it. But all the time, I'm raising teenage daughters, so my parenting is changed, and like I think I'm the amazing parent I am because I'm so aware of what I was raised from and what that meant and how that formed the person that I was. And I've been told that I give my children a lot of freedom, and I think that's because I saw the value in not having those limited beliefs, and I want them to have that same experience without all the trauma that I faced. So definitely parenting is the best way. Like, it's taken everything and it's squeezed out into this beautiful cake of two beautiful humans that are there because of me and are as healthy and happy as they are. Even though they have their own trauma, they're able to process through it in a way that I'm like I look at them and I'm like, if only I had been like that when I was their age. And that's success to me. That is what, like, learning, solving all that intergenerational trauma, because it goes past my mom. I was able to kind of figure that out and flip it over onto the other side. So, it's humbling for me to check in with that. It's humbling, and it reminds me of, you spoke earlier of your privilege. I have privileges too. Mine maybe were created by me and taking, the bull by the horns and taking opportunities, but I have privileges in my life right now that I'm very thankful for. And like I said, it humbles me. So I volunteer, for example, with a local organization that helps the homeless. I'm very in tune with, nonprofits and what they need. I need to make me happy. I need to nurture that need to help people. And so that's why I got into coaching, because it was like, okay, how do I help more people? How do I help people get to what I call this other side of life, where you're so aware of what formed you and why you are the way you are, that you can just live I live so unapologetically. Like, I watch reality TV. I have friends that are like, oh, that garbage. And I'm like, you call it garbage. I call it people studying. Okay. Like, leave me alone. I don't care.
I've had some serious realization moments from those shows, right?
Right? Where you're like, OMG, this is what a douchebag looks like now. You know what I mean? Like, there's some value in that in life when you're out there experiencing people. It helps give you markers and indicators. So I just live unapologetically. And like I said, one of my needs is to help people. And that my background humbles me. It just humbles me. And it reminds me of, what could be and what people also today are experiencing. So it also gives me a very deep sense of empathy for people who are struggling. That is one thing with coaching. I originally got into coaching because I wanted it to be a side hustle, and I imagined myself sitting in like a big mansion coaching rich people. I don't know why. I think it was because it was in the pandemic. So I was like completely disconnected from people, and I was too deep in my selling sunset watching TV or something. But I did my certification. I learned how to be a coach. And now I find myself, it has propelled my full-time career. And instead of kind of building this big giant side hustle, I'm taking the time instead to understand how to be more impactful. And through the volunteering, through, I've been doing a lot of coaching for clients that maybe, I'm not charging the big giant rates, but I'm working with them to see what they can afford. And that's just more my style. So, that's kind of how I've evolved. When I first got into the space, there was all those people, you got to make $10,000 every month, blah, blah, blah. You got to scale up big. And I said to myself, you know what? I said, I'm going to take 12 years. I'm going to give myself 12 years. Like, that's my goal, to be sitting in a place where people know who I am as a coach. I'm going to give myself a nice long runway so I could explore the space, so I could figure things out, figure out what I want to do with it all. And that's kind of where I'm at today. That's where I've landed as a coach. I'm not gonna be out there sort of throwing out posts every day and all these things. Like it doesn't sit with me organically, but like opportunities like this where people want to talk, that's my jam. It's
Yeah.
about finding out how to, I love the word flow. I love when you've said that too, right? Like just kind of let it flow into what it's going to become. And I think I have a lot to offer the world with those experiences, and with sharing those experiences and people understanding the lessons that I learned. It's an opportunity for people to kind of see that it's possible to feel privileged, feel humbled, feel grounded, coming from places that are very traumatic, scary, dark. Like it is possible. So most of my clients, I think moving forward, I've dabbled in all kinds of clients, worked with all kinds of people. It's been super fun, but my passion is for people who are coming out of trauma work, or know how to process through those sort of situations on their own, but need that extra little oomph, that little reminder, that cheerleader, that sort of, grounding and humbling and identifying privileges and getting rid of limiting beliefs, like just those things that still, you need to work on. And that's the space that I love to work in. That's going to be for the rest of my life what I'm going to focus on.
Amazing. I can just feel how much of a how much of a guiding light you can be for people in those scenarios, for sure. So thank you so much for everything that you've come on so openly, vulnerably, and shared with me today. What you were saying as well about sort of at the start, you get into this coaching world of like, oh yeah, I could chase the money and like live the easy life. And actually though, when time goes on, we kind of go a little bit more back to basics of, well, actually it's really about the connections and the conversations. And the money will probably still come, but if this is the focus, then and giving yourself that time and grace just to, I'm just going to explore this. Like, I love that approach, and I'm sitting in a similar space right now as well. So best of luck for sure with everything there. And just finally, I'd love to know, I asked this question to my previous guest as well, but could you tell us something perhaps super present that you're currently working on about yourself, however big, small, trivial it might seem, something that's happened in the last couple of weeks, that isn't fixed or healed or perfect, that has maybe come up for you?
Let me go through the list.
Yeah.
I have some family members right now that are struggling, I'm struggling to support from afar once again. And that's constantly reminding me and bringing me back to, like I said, a humbling place, and also a place of frustration at my limited abilities to support people from afar. So trying to process through that. I'm about to merge families with my partner, and we both have teenage kids. So the fear around, is this going to work? How are we going to navigate through this? Do I have the energy? All of processing through all of that. And then I work in a corporate world, which the coaching has done incredible for me. It's given me an amazing platform at work, and people I think are getting to see a better version of me that is more authentic and real. And so kind of trying to navigate the waters of, it's a work environment, I'm getting paid, there's a lot of people with different motivations, so kind of try to understand where I fit in as this new sort of, post-coaching experience and learning Sarah. And it's challenging. It's a constant check-in with people that I trust, and hope can help ground me in those moments too. Because so those big three things right now are up top of mind when I think about what conversations I'm having with my peeps.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that. You have absolutely embraced the spirit of what these chats are all about, so I can't thank you enough for that, and I'm sure we're going to connect further, and the best of luck for your ongoing journey with coaching, and just with navigating the rest of these things, your family merging, and all of this good stuff going on for you. So thank you so much for your time, and yeah, take care.
Thank you so much, and thanks for creating such a beautiful space. I had an amazing time. The conversation flowed so well, and you're doing a great job. This has been an awesome experience. So thank you for creating the space to have this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. All the best.
Thanks, Abbie. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.